Hey guys, check out my 1935 fuel truck. Look, I'm gonna walk you through this truck today and show you some of the cool features that we did to make this a daily driver, and also some of the history and the cool things about the truck. The thing that I like about this 1935 Ford is the sexy flow of the body on this thing. So if you look at the front bumper, I mean, it doesn't really look like much, it's plain and simple. But the cool thing about it is it's rounded off, it kind of flows with the fenders. I love the big wide fenders on this truck. The headlights aren't overdone, they're just perfect. You know, Ford was really onto something. I mean, back in those days, his style was so awesome. Like the design of these trucks, and every year he progressed. He was so into wanting to beat the next guy, whether it was Dodge Brothers or Chevrolet or International, he always wanted to have the nicest looking truck. So one of the cool options they had, probably pre-1930s and after the 1930s all the way through the 50s, they had these vents right here on the front of the cowl of the truck. And what would happen is there's a lever inside of there, you'd push it, this flips up, airflow would begin inside the cab, and you know, cools your feet down, kind of just gets that turbulence of air flowing around in there. With the window cracked open, it's a turbulence. And it was kind of a neat option. I mean, they didn't have air conditioning, they never even thought of air conditioning at that time, because even houses didn't have air, you know? So really cool option, and you could see how things have evolved over the last 85 years. It's pretty cool. Okay, so the cool thing about this truck is what they would do is they would get up in the morning, probably, they would fuel this truck up, okay? There's probably 3 500-gallon tanks in here. There's baffles probably here and here. So there's, you know, like 500 here, 500 here, and 500 here, okay? It goes pretty deep. It goes all the way down to the frame. And what they would do is probably fill it full of gasoline, kerosene, and diesel fuel way back into the 30s. So I've got a 1935 John Deere A tractor, for instance. And let's say you live, you know, 40 miles out in the middle of nowhere, and you don't really have a way to carry fuel. Well, this truck would drive out to your ranch, fuel up all your tanks, and go back to town, fuel up, and go to the next ranch. So it was basically a fuel delivery truck. Back in the old days, they would come out to your ranch and fuel up everything that you needed to on the place to survive and live. You know, I think back, like, how cool would it have been to say in 1938 or 1940, to drive this truck out and down some dirt road to some old rancher, looking at all the cool stuff that's out in the field, all the old tractors, all the neat stuff, and pull up, visit with the guy, fuel it up, and you know, it was a great friendship, I'm sure, back then, because there wasn't a lot of people around that were on ranches in that area. This truck right here probably lived for a lot of years because, you know, you got to think, this truck was built through the Great Depression, okay? There probably wasn't a lot of them. Right after the Great Depression was World War II. There was not a lot of fuel trucks probably through that process because they were using all the metal and the trucks for the war. So you got to think, this old truck probably was in service probably all the way up into the 50s, maybe the 60s. They probably used this truck. So it's probably been around a long time. It's probably got a lot of use out of it. But it's really quite a cool piece of history. Okay, one of the cool features that I really like about the bed on this truck is just the attention to detail, the little things that they did that made it look so cool. Like number one, these little pop out pieces right here that are on the side of the truck could have been anything. I think they built the bed and then it was up to you to have your sign put on it. Okay, so it could have been a Texaco, it could have been a Standard. This one happened to be a Union, okay? And it may not have been. They might have took the Texaco off and put this on later. But these are all made out of sheet metal, like a guy that really had to know what he was doing back in the old days to actually build these signs on the side of this truck. Actually was a very talented fabricator. You could see on the bed here, these rails right here, and they've been banged up. You can see they've hit things and, you know, it's been used a little bit. But even like the curvature of this handrail right here, it wasn't like they just stuck a handrail on there. Like, this was made, it was all rounded off really good and finished up, and then they plated it. in some kind of a chrome back in the old days. But you can see it's all removable, and they just took pride in everything they did. I mean, if you look at the handrail up on top of here, look at the little balls at the end. Like, it was done in style. They wanted it to look good, but this was all chromed out back in the day. So I'll bet this truck really shined back in the 30s and 40s. But not only was this stuff designed to serve a purpose, but they actually put some pride into it. It actually works and it looks good. And that's what's so cool about this old truck. I mean, look at these little steps they put in here. I mean, the way they stepped it down so you could get up on here, get in and fuel your truck. You know, all the little handrails on it were really cool. I mean, look at the fender skirts on this thing. They're huge. The fender skirts look really cool on this thing. It was just pride. They had so much. I mean, the doors and the way that they opened up and the hinged. I mean, you got to think those hinges are 85 years old and these doors still work. I mean, the latches are a little wore out, but that's, you know, that's common for a truck this old. Okay, the cool thing about this is the phone number on the back is all hand painted. I mean, you could see how skilled these guys were. I mean, look at that. That was all done just by hand. They didn't have like a stencil, you know, they didn't have stickers. So that was really cool. And then you got the Pegasus and the sign and the mobile. So it was a mobile truck at one time. It's probably Texaco, Union, standard, obviously, because of the colors that are in it. Here was the address right here. So if you want to get fuel, driving around out on the country roads, the guy's looking at it, he's like, here it is, 800 First Street Avenue. That's where you call to get this fuel. But let me open up the back right here. Let's take a look. Okay. All right, this is where the work's at. So the guy'd pull up on the ranch or wherever he's at, and each one of these valves right here was a different fuel. So let's say this one was kerosene, this one could have been gasoline, and this one right here could have been diesel fuel, okay? So each one of these you tie into, you turn the valve on. Right here, it's actually uncapped at this point right now, but the fuel would come in and then you run it into the tank, you turn the PTO on, and the PTO would pump the fuel into the tank. So this is where all the work was. Your tools were up here. Now, I would imagine that what he had here with these washers were probably the gallons. And as he went through them, he could slide one at a time to keep track of how much fuel he was going through. And then by the time you got to here, your tank was out of fuel, okay? That's what I would say these indicate right here at some point. I mean, I'm sure somebody put that in there, but that is really cool how they did that back then. But you can see there's some old stuff in here that's still laying around in the truck that we just left in it. There was a lot of different old garbage that we actually took out of it that wasn't any good, but it is neat. It's really cool how the door, I mean, all the hinges on this thing are all forged. You can see how it was all a hand forged hinge to make it work so it didn't fall on your head, because you don't want that door to fall on your head. It's super freaking heavy. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get inside this old truck and kind of show you the interior. You know, these trucks are really cool on the inside. I mean, just the little bit of detail that they did, it was simple, but it was really cool. I mean, these old gauges that they actually still have in this truck, I mean, we left them in here. These actually still work as your water temp and as your oil pressure. So these we got to work, they're mechanical. I mean, the glove box works on the thing. I mean, there's nothing in there, but it probably rotted out. Our old lever is under here for our vent, so you can kick that open and get airflow. The old lever back up underneath here. You can't really see it, but that's where that's basically was your air conditioner back in 1935 or 1934. Steering column is basically the same original steering column that was in it. We didn't take it out. All the steering is pretty much the same. As you can see, this old flashlight that they used to carry in here, I'm sure they used this a lot back in the old days. I mean, you know, especially if you pulled up somewhere at nighttime and you're trying to fuel up and see how much fuel's in the tank. I'm sure this flashlight was used quite a bit. It's kind of neat that it's still in the truck and it's still here, because, you know, usually those got taken. This piece, people want this because it's so cool looking. But all the gauges work. I mean, for the most part, the speedometer bounces back and forth a little bit to show that it has something going on in there. And our volts work on the thing. I mean, everything about it is just really cool because it actually works. You know, I mean, look at this old cigarette lighter. I mean, smoking was a big deal back then, so this was probably an option you had to have in your truck. So kind of neat. The shifter in it is actually the original shifter cut off and welded onto the transmission that we put in here, and we'll go through that in a minute. But we wanted to leave it where it had its high and low for the rear end lever on it, so it just kind of gives it that nostalgic look inside of it. You know, if you look at the seat's been all redone. We put some WelderUp. We made it kind of look like the old standard symbol, which turned out really good. It looks really awesome in here. The old fire extinguisher, which was in the truck when we found it, we just cleaned it up and put it back in. I mean, I'm sure that was pretty important to have when you're dealing with fuel and gasoline. But other than that, I mean, it's just neat. It's simple. It's user-friendly. It's just neat. I mean, the floor turned out really good. We covered up all the wood with these little pieces right here that came off oil cans that I found, and covered up the wood pieces just to kind of give it a cool look and make it pop. Hood open. Okay, so this is just awesomeness right here. I mean, this is a 4-cylinder Cummins. It's about a 4 1/4 inch piston in it. So the V8 flathead had about 3 inch. This one here is a little bit over 4 inches. It's about 4 3/4 inch stroke, so it makes a lot of torque. What makes this little motor so unique and cool is this pump that's on here. Now, a lot of these came with like a rotary pump, which is a smaller pump. They don't deliver as much fuel and RPM as this one does. This one here, you can get more RPM out of it, and it delivers a lot more fuel, which is really cool if you want to make this thing run a little bit harder. Right now, we left it all stock, so we can just drive around. It's got the stock fuel pump on it, everything, the stock turbo on it, and that's another thing. It's turbocharged, which actually makes it build a little bit more boost, makes it a lot snappier, and pulls a lot better. So it is a neat little motor. We found this motor basically out of a junkyard. I remember finding the motor. It was laying in the desert, literally on a pallet. And we brought it back to the shop and literally put fuel in this thing and made it run. So it's a pretty cool piece. Let's move to the other side so I can show you the turbo real quick. All right, let's look at this side. Okay, so here over on this side is your turbocharger. It's intercooled. But what's so cool about this little thing is like this little 4-cylinder fit inside the frame on this thing. We actually used the factory V8 motor mounts. So these old Cummins motors, you could build a motor mount on the front of the motor that'll actually bolt right into the frame rail on this thing where the factory one did. So the cross member where the V8 used to bolt in, we use the same exact ones. Behind this thing is a 5-speed NV4500 transmission, which is really awesome. I mean, the gears that are in this thing are really low. This truck probably don't want to go over 50 miles an hour, 55 maybe, but it makes a ton of torque. It feels really good. It's a fun little truck to drive around town, actually. I mean, there's no power steering, but you know, you can't have it all sometimes. So anyway, the way that this little 4-cylinder shoved in there and went in this truck, it was like it almost was made to be in here. So if you guys are ever looking to do this year of truck with actually the stock frame that's in it, a little 4-cylinder will actually fit in there really good, and it's perfect for it. You know, the cool thing about the little engine that's in this thing, the little 4-cylinders, they're so diverse. I mean, you can use them in anything. I mean, they come out of a bread truck, they come out of a backhoe, they come out of a skid loader. I mean, anything almost. And you can pull them out of something that's got 1,000,000 hours on it or 100,000 miles on it, drop it in something like this and just go driving it. I mean, that's what's so cool. I didn't open this motor or have to do anything. I just put it in here, put fuel to it, fired it up, and here we go. So that's what I love about the little Cummins motor. It's just neat. So let's get this thing down, lock the hood down on it, and take this baby for a ride. It's gonna be fun. Yeah, this little Ford truck feels pretty good. You know, it feels like an old truck. Like, you know, aside of the motor, everything's pretty much the same. I mean, the steering feels like something from 1934, 1935, you know, that era. Just looking at the dash and the gauges and the hood, I mean, it just feels cool to drive this old truck around. And that's what's cool about this little 4-cylinder, is it's not like super crazy where it doesn't feel authentic. Like, the truck feels authentic. I think it's probably a little louder than it was back in the old days because, you know, that little 4-cylinder makes a lot of racket. But it's so cool. I mean, going through the gears on this thing feels like 80 years ago. You know what I mean? I wonder what the old guys were thinking when they got this truck brand new. You know, they were like, oh, this thing's sweet, you know? But I mean, to think that you had to drive this thing 50 miles out on a dirt road somewhere to fuel up somebody's tanks. No radio, no air conditioning, no iPhone, no communication. It was just you and this old truck, and that's it. So cool. Yeah, it's cool. You can hear that old 4-cylinder start to pull real hard. The torque that that little 4-cylinder makes is cool. You don't even have to shift the gears. You just come around the corner, put your foot in it, and it just pulls it out. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Uh-oh. Little baby quail. Hey guys, look, at the end of the day, this is a very cool truck. I mean, it's got a lot of history. It's a collectible piece. To me, the truck is collectible because it's so rare. There's not very many out there. And it's just a cool truck to look at. The history that it has and what it's been through, the different gas stations. I mean, the more I look at it, you can see colors of 5 or 6 different gas station themes that these guys had all the way up probably into the 60s. So to actually have this thing back on the road, running under diesel power, it's just super cool. I mean, you drive this thing through town and people just thumbs up, that thing's cool. They love it. So listen, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you like and subscribe to our videos because it will indicate when we are doing our next video. We're gonna stay on this. We're gonna go through a lot of cars, so make sure you stay tuned and keep watching, and we'll see you guys later.